Welcome to Acrylic Code. Today we have a new TouchDesigner tutorial on this animation. I will show you how you can create this step by step and then you can add your own touch and be creative. Before we move on, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to support us into making more tutorials. We also recently launched our Patreon with different tiers to offer all TouchDesigner files, online tools to create generative art, as well as personalized classes. I will leave the link to the Patreon in the comments for anyone who is interested. Now back to today's tutorial. This tutorial is a continuation of the Metaball tutorial that we published 2 weeks ago. So you should go back, follow that, and then come back here to keep going. Or you could go to our Patreon and download the file. Okay, now first thing, we're going to clean up a bit and get rid of the nodes we no longer need. Let's delete the convert and the switch. Then we're going to create a particle system with the data of the metaballs. I'm going to make some space after the texture and then press Alt-N to attach an all, which is going to hold the position data. So let's go ahead and rename it to pause for position, and for clarity I will color the node red. Then we're going to instance a bunch of boxes. So let's press Tab, create a box sub and attach it to the geo. Go to the parameter window of the box sub and let's scale it down to 0.01. To reduce the thickness of the line, let's go to the parameter window of the line sub, set the width near to 0.2 and the width var to 2.1. Great, now I like to have this network underneath the geo so that I have a clear idea of what is happening. So I'm just going to organize a bit. Now let's open the parameter window of the geometry, go to the Instancing tab and toggle on the Instancing. Then grab the position null and drop it onto the Translate Up parameter. Set the Translate X to P0, Translate Y to P1 and Translate Z to P2, and we'll get this effect. Now we're in this line mode right here, which is controlling the color. If we go back to the switch and set the index to 1, then we go back to the Fong material that we had before. And now we have the metaballs coming through this particle system. So the metaballs are just kind of distorting the grid, but we want to get an effect on the rest of the grid to achieve the look we saw in the beginning of the video. For this purpose, we're going to introduce the spring sub. The spring sub will assign a simulated mass to each box, and the whole geometry will be deformed by forces that simulate simple physics. Now for the spring sub, we need to create groups. To understand the concept of groups, let's go to the grid and press A to make it viewer active. Let's press P to open the display options, and if we zoom in, we see here in the node the points which are being rendered. Now in here we're going to define some fixed points, which in our case will be the edges of the grid as well as the metaballs. And when the metaballs are going to move, the rest of the points, except for the edges, are going to be affected by the spring forces. If this is not clear now, we'll understand in a minute. Let's right-click on the connecting line after the grid, go to Insert Operator, and let's create a group sub. In the parameter window, let's set the entity to points. Then go to the Create tab and toggle off the Bounce parameter. Right now we have a group with all the points of the grid. In order to select only the edge points, we decrease the sides on all 3 directions until only the outer edge is marked as blue. Now the blue points are actually unselected and the yellow ones are selected. And we want the opposite of this. So let's go back to the Group tab and we're going to rename this to Inside. So this sub has the inside points selected. To invert the selected points, we're going to right-click after the Group sub, go to Invert Operator, and we're going to attach another group sub. In the parameter window of the new sub, let's set the entities again to points and rename it to Outside. Then go to the Combine tab and we're going to specify the group whose members we want to edit, which is the group with the outside points. Then, if we toggle on the Not parameter, we're going to include all members that are not part of the group that we will specify in the group parameter below, which we will set to Inside. So all of this translates to outside, not the inside. So until now, we've set the edge points to not get affected by the spring forces. For the next step, we will also set the metaball points to not get affected by the forces. We will do this by toggling on the Create Point Group parameter of the Ray sub. Like so, the metaball points are marked as yellow, and wherever they are, they will not be affected by the spring sub. Great, so now it's finally time to apply the forces. So let's right-click after the ray, go to Attach Operator and add the spring sub. Now in the beginning everything will look crazy. In the parameter window, let's first toggle on the Accurate Moves parameter, then go to the Nodes tab and we will define which will be the fixed points, so the edge points and the ray hit group. So now we see that the outer points are acting like a fixed boundary, but the movement in the middle is still too intense. To dial this down, let's first increase the initial tension to 5 and the spring constant to 100. Once we do this, we will get this water drop effect on our animation. From here you can play around and try out these other parameters, or you could render right after the spring sub and have this animation on its own. But for today we will continue with the particles. Now for the next step, we want to make the size of the boxes which are closer to the camera to be bigger. To do this, we're going to right-click after the position null and attach a sub to chop. Press Alt and N to attach a null, and in here if we zoom in we notice that the Z values are going from 0 to 0.2. We're going to use these values to scale the operator. Let's go ahead and rename it to Scale, color the node red, then drag and drop it onto the scale operator of the geo. In here we're going to scale all the values with a TZ. Once we do this, all the boxes will look very small, and this is because the Z values are very small themselves. So let's right-click between the sub to chop and the scale null, go to Insert Operator and attach a math job. In the parameter window, go to the Multi-Add tab and increase the multiply value to increase the size of all the boxes. And this is the effect we were looking for. The boxes are really big when they're closer to the camera and they fade away when they move further away from the camera. To gain a little performance, I will select all the operators and turn off the viewer. Great, now in the next step we're going to rotate the boxes. To do this, let's right-click on the line before the math, go to Add Operator and we'll create a pattern operator. Press Alt and N to create a null and rename the null to Rotate. Open the parameter window of the pattern, go to the Channel tab and change the channel name to RZ. Drag the Rotate null, drop it onto the Rotate op of the geo and set the Rotate Z to RZ. We will not notice a drastic change, and this is because the pattern only goes from -1 to 1. In here we have two choices. We either set the amplitude to 360 or we go back with the amplitude to 1 and attach a math operator instead. In the parameter window, let's go to the range tab, and in here we have the from range -1 to 1 and the to range 0 to 360. Here we can also animate the phase with abs timed at seconds times 0.3 or choose other types of patterns. And this is basically it. Now you have the base, you can try this out yourself and give other parameters or attach new nodes. I'm curious to see what you come up with, so if you recreate this, please tag us. Otherwise, this was it for this tutorial. I hope you got some inspiration and learned something new. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll see you next week. Until then, have a great time. Bye!